In the introduction of the play Electra, Orestes arrives in Mycenae to exact revenge on his father's murderers. He's accompanied by his friend Pylades and his friend and former tutor, Pedagogus, who rescued him after the murder of his father, Agamemnon. Orestes has Pedagogus pretend to be a messenger, bringing the news that Orestes has died in a chariot accident. Electra arrives, still mourning her father, years after his death. Electra talks with her younger sister, Chrysothemis, who has a more practical approach to the situation and prefers to keep her head down. In the rising action, Chrysothemis tells her sister Electra she is on the way to their father's grave with funeral libations from their mother, who's been frightened by a nightmare about Agamemnon. Electra tells Chrysothemis to throw away Clytemnestra's libations and to put libations from them on the grave instead. Chrysothemis goes off to do so. Electra next talks with Clytemnestra, who defends her actions, saying she was right to kill Agamemnon because he had sacrificed Electra's older sister, Iphigenia, to the goddess Artemis. Electra and her mother continue to argue until Pedagogus arrives disguised as a messenger and tells them Orestes is dead and that an urn containing his ashes will be arriving shortly. Clytemnestra's response mingles sadness and relief. Electra is inconsolable in response to the news of her brother's death and begs Chrysothemis to help her avenge their father. But Chrysothemis continues to counsel caution and refuses to participate. She implores Electra to be wiser and restrain herself. Orestes returns in disguise, bringing a funeral urn that supposedly contains his ashes. Electra holds the urn, crying over the loss of her brother and the end of her hopes for her family. Unable to bear her sorrow, Orestes reveals his true identity. She rejoices, but he cautions her to hide her joy so as not to give them away. Pedagogus comes out of the palace, tells them to keep quiet, and says they must act immediately because Clytemnestra is alone. In the climax of the play, Electra watches out for Aegisthus' return, and Orestes and his friends go inside and kill Clytemnestra, whose frantic cries can be heard. Orestes briefly reappears to report on his success, then goes back into the palace. In the falling action, Aegisthus arrives and wants to see Orestes' body. The doors of the palace open to reveal Orestes and Pylades standing beside a covered corpse. Aegisthus pulls back the covering and is stunned to see Clytemnestra's body. In the resolution, Orestes leads Aegisthus away and kills him as well. The chorus rejoices that the house of Atreus has been freed of its curse. Four key characters perform the play of revenge that is Electra. For years, the titular protagonist of the play, Electra, has mourned her father and openly spurned her mother and stepfather for murdering him. She spends her time crying, wailing, and loudly casting accusations at them. Her father Agamemnon was murdered by Electra's now stepfather Aegisthus at the urging of her mother, Clytemnestra. And although she is a king's daughter, Electra dresses in ragged clothing to further show her disapproval of her mother and stepfather, who she feels treat her as a slave. Every day, Electra expects her brother Orestes to return from exile and act upon their shared desire for revenge. When she learns that Orestes is dead, she tries to convince her sister Chrysothemis to help. Her sister refuses and begs Electra to be wise. But Electra, dominated by her passion for revenge, is determined to do her duty to her father and exact justice. She is pitiless toward her mother and stepfather as Orestes kills them, taking pleasure in their deaths. Chrysothemis, although older than Orestes, was quite young when her father was killed. And while she agrees with Electra that his murder was an evil deed, she feels powerless to do anything about it. She would rather forget the past and make the best of her lot, so she accepts the role of a dutiful daughter to her mother and stepfather. Chrysothemis feels that accepting her mother and Aegisthus as Argos' rulers will preserve her freedom and provide a counterpoint to Electra's thirst for revenge by counseling Electra to be wise, to let go of her anger, and accept what she cannot change. Clytemnestra may act as if she were justified in murdering Agamemnon, but the deed still torments her. Not only must she live in fear that her son Orestes may return any day to avenge his father's death, but she has a dream about Agamemnon that seems to foretell her downfall. She hurries to send her obedient daughter, Chrysothemis, to decorate Agamemnon's tomb with gifts on her behalf, hoping to appease him. And she gets defensive and angry when confronted by her daughter Electra, who never lets her forget what she has done. She can finally relax when a messenger brings the news that Orestes has been killed in a chariot race. Orestes, still alive after all, comes to exact his revenge. She dies begging her son to show her the mercy she denied his father. Orestes, although smuggled out of Mycenae as a small child, returns as an adult to exact vengeance. He's received instructions from Apollo's oracle and, in addition to seeking personal revenge, sees himself as an instrument of the gods' justice. Having spent the majority of his life away and knowing his sister Electra only through their secret letters, Orestes does not reveal his presence even to her. When he realizes how deeply his fake death has wounded her, he relents and reveals his true identity. Still, like Electra, Orestes is content to wait for more than a fleeting reunion until their revenge is complete. The empty urn, grave offerings, the house, and the scepter are the powerful, pervasive symbols in the play Electra. The funeral urn is supposed to contain Orestes' ashes, though the audience knows from the start of the play that Orestes is alive and well. While any funeral urn is a symbol of loss, this one is also a symbol of the deceit on which the action of the play turns. When Electra and Clytemnestra first encounter the urn, each believes it holds Orestes' remains. The reaction of each woman is very different. When Electra first sees the urn, she treats it almost as if she were Orestes' mother. Clytemnestra's reaction to the urn is just to decorate it for burial as required by society. The urn is empty of ashes just as Clytemnestra is empty of maternal love and grief. The urn signifies that Electra's vengeance is not dead, and also that Clytemnestra's fate is sealed. Grave offerings are discussed in Electra but are not actually physically present on the stage. In Greek society, remembering the dead ensured their immortality and was considered a social, civic, and religious obligation. Graves of the wealthy and powerful were decorated with elaborate painted statuary of the deceased. People, mostly women, regularly visited the graves of their dead to leave offerings, including mementos, valuables, food, and drinks known as libations. Such offerings ensured that the dead person was nourished in the afterlife. When Chrysothemis discovers milk has been poured on Agamemnon's grave, this libation, plus garlands of flowers and a freshly cut lock of hair, tells her that Orestes has returned from exile. The house is another major symbol. In Electra, the palace of the rulers and home of Clytemnestra, her daughters, and her husband Aegisthus represents Agamemnon's bloodline, the house of Atreus, and its past, present, and future generations. But what was once Electra's home has become her prison, for she is not allowed to leave the palace unless Aegisthus is away. Electra's incessant grieving allows no one to forget that the palace was formerly Agamemnon's home, and Orestes as well. The hearth, considered the heart of any home, was the scene of Agamemnon's murder. It is also the setting of Clytemnestra's dream about her husband's family tree growing to overshadow the kingdom, and it becomes the place Orestes chooses to execute his father's murderers. In general, a king's scepter is a symbol of his authority. Agamemnon's scepter is a reminder of how power is passed down through the generations, from Zeus through the house of Atreus until it's taken by Aegisthus. In Clytemnestra's dream, Agamemnon's scepter is back in Agamemnon's hand. When he strikes the hearth with it, a tree shoots up and overshadows all of Mycenae. Thus, his scepter becomes a symbol of the dominance and rule of Agamemnon's descendants. Duty, justice and revenge, loyalty versus pragmatism, and motherhood are the dominant themes in the play Electra. Indeed, in Electra, duty to family is paramount. All the characters claim duty to family as their motivation. Electra and Orestes claim a duty to their murdered father to avenge him. Clytemnestra similarly claims she's motivated by a duty to the daughter Agamemnon killed as a sacrifice to Artemis. Even Aegisthus is motivated by duty to family. Agamemnon and Aegisthus' fathers were brothers who had long fought over the rulership of Mycenae. People also have a duty to the gods, but for Sophocles, this duty is secondary, which is just as well, since performing one's duty to the gods can end in trouble, a lesson Agamemnon learned only too well when he sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia to Artemis. Justice and revenge is another key theme. Electra stands alone in her pursuit of justice. The world around her is corrupt, ruled by murderers. Her mother, Clytemnestra, has rejected her children, and her sister, Chrysothemis, considers it wiser to fall in line with Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. For Electra, justice is not a matter of personal convenience, it's a matter of what is right, and avenging her father is definitely right. But Clytemnestra and Aegisthus also claim to have acted in revenge. Since the revenge they carried out on Agamemnon was about forming an alliance to gain political power, it's unjust. The chorus's ambivalence perhaps reflects Sophocles' attempt to represent the complexity of this type of revenge. Loyalty versus pragmatism is a theme embodied by Electra and her sister Chrysothemis. Electra's loyalty to her long-dead father and absent brother is unyielding, even when she realizes she has no allies at all. Chrysothemis, on the other hand, feels equally strongly that she must be realistic. Their mother and Aegisthus rule Argos, and through obedience and good nature, she'll be able to win their approval and live a happy life. Lastly, where motherhood is concerned, Clytemnestra is a terrible role model. When talking with Electra, she claims to have killed Agamemnon to avenge her daughter Iphigenia. Yet she had taken Aegisthus as her lover, and it was likely she wanted her husband, Aegisthus' enemy, out of the way. After hearing that Orestes has been killed in a chariot race, Clytemnestra claims to feel sorry for the loss of her son, but her dominant feeling is relief from the fear that Orestes is sneaking up on her to kill her. In contrast, Electra, who took on the role of mother for her little brother, Orestes, after their father's murder, ended up protecting him from meeting the same fate by sending him off with the family's tutor to be raised elsewhere. When the messenger reports that Orestes is dead, Electra is the one who grieves, as a mother might. Electra is a play marked by unique motifs and style. Cursed bloodline and revenge is frequently mentioned in Electra. Agamemnon's bloodline had been tainted when his grandfather murdered two people in his quest to marry a princess. One of his victims cursed his descendants, who proceed to slaughter each other down the centuries. At the end of the play, Aegisthus remarks, "Is this dwelling doomed to see all woes of Pelops' line now and in time to come?" These words invoke the tension between fate and free will, and between justice and revenge. Disguise and deception demonstrate how people are not always as they appear and do not always speak the truth. Orestes and his companion's revenge plot involves multiple layers of deception, and Clytemnestra pretends that she took revenge on Agamemnon purely out of grief for his sacrifice of their daughter Iphigenia, but has hidden personal and political motives for his murder. Electra later on must disguise her joy about her brother being alive. Electra revolves around the role of the dead in the world of the living. The Greeks believed that the dead were alive in the underworld and remained alive as long as they were remembered by the living. Agamemnon is still present in the hearts of his children, especially Electra and Orestes, whose revenge is fueled by his ongoing presence in their lives and as a warning sign in Clytemnestra's dream. Mourning is a continual motif throughout the first half of the play. Electra's introduction sees her mourning her dead father. Pedagogus calls Orestes away to pour libations on Agamemnon's grave, another form of mourning. The motif is absent in the second half of Electra, as events move so rapidly toward resolution that there's no more time for mourning. The concept of time is mentioned repeatedly in Electra from different perspectives. Until Orestes returns, Electra has been frozen in time, unable to move beyond the moment when she lost her father and had to send her beloved brother into exile. Her grief over her father's death is never ending, despite the chorus's assurance that time is a god who makes rough ways smooth. Finally, juxtaposition is a literary technique that allows an author to compare and contrast two characters, events, or things. Sophocles often contrasts words and deeds by using antithesis, placing something in opposition to something else. Noticeable contrasts are those of life and death, Orestes and Agamemnon, light and darkness, Electra and Clytemnestra's prayers to Apollo, different grave offerings for Agamemnon or Orestes' graves, and, frankly, words and actions in general.